Welcome back to CyberBee. This is the channel where I share what I learn as I go. And today we are talking about the cybersecurity job search process. We are in stage one, apply, and today we are talking all about resumes because it is that important. Now, I want you to start thinking about the resume as more than just a list of your previous jobs that you've held, but as a marketing document that advocates on your behalf to people that you have not met yet, because that's really what it does. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about resume content. So, what is supposed to go on your resume? One, the professional summary. It's a brief 2 to 3 sentence intro at the top of your resume that highlights who you are, the kind of experience and value and skill set that you're bringing, and perhaps what you aim to achieve next. Think of it as your elevator pitch, packed with keywords but still human. Okay, skills. It is a bullet point list of relevant technical and soft skills. So these are, say, tools, platforms, frameworks, and abilities that match the job. And focus on skills you can confidently speak to or that aligns with the roles that you're applying for. Third, education and certificates. Sometimes people like to split these into two different categories, especially if you have like over 10 certificates, maybe. I like to combine them because I'm still in my beginner stage of this new career. I've included my degrees, my diplomas, my relevant certs like our CompTIA Sec Plus, ISC squared, certified in cybersecurity, so on and so forth. And you can also include ones that are in progress. So, for example, if this particular job posting is asking you to have CISA from ISACA and you are currently studying for it, list that and put in the expected completion date, say like June 2025 or something like that. Fourth, work experience. We all know that we need to have this in there. So this is your professional history written in reverse chronological order. So from your most recent or your current one all the way down to the very first one that you've had. Now, if you've had more than 10 years, a lot of people recommend leaving things off that are older than 10 years. I would agree, and that's what I did on mine. And definitely use bullet points to describe what you did and the impact that I had. Now, remember this point here. I'm going to come back to this and refer a resource for you. What we want to do here is focus on results, not just responsibilities. Number 5, other. I put other because it could be a whole bunch of other things. And just remember that it needs to be relevant to the job posting and what you've done. And that goes for every single section that we've covered already. So, other could be your volunteer work, it could be projects that you've done. So, for example, home labs and stuff like that. It could be freelance work that you've done, so on and so forth. This is where you can highlight personal projects or open source contributions or volunteer experience and freelance gigs. Okay, so remember that point that I made before? Well, let me introduce you back to Jeff Sue. Here is a resume video that I found on his channel. He has many, but I like this one the best because, let me just jump to it. Whoop. He basically talks about his 5 golden rules for writing a resume. Please go ahead and watch this for the full value of this video, but my main takeaway here is quantifiable metrics. So always remember that no matter which section of the resume you're working on, okay? So quantifiable metrics or measurable metrics, his term in this video, what does that mean? It means that every single time you have a bullet point, it would be a lot better if you can add a certain number to it to describe how much you increased the performance or decreased the cost or lag time, something like that, so that you can actually quantify the output of what you've done. This subreddit thread here, people are very generous. They are literally sharing their own, or at least a template of a resume that they worked off of. This guy here said that this resume got him his job at Google. Now, of course, take all this with a grain of salt. We don't know these people, they're anonymous. Who knows if it's truth or not? However, if more than 5 or 10 people are saying the same thing, you can probably trust it. So, the name of the game here is discernment. Be able to judge for yourself, right? So, I have this image of the template that he said he used opened up here. So, let's go through it together. Okay, first thing I see, well, whatever we're looking at right now, it's like the top half of the first page. That is called above the fold. This is kind of where all the important bits should be in a resume because, as you know, recruiters only have about 5, or maybe 10, if I'm being generous, seconds to look at your resume, to skim your resume, actually, and decide if it is in the yes or no pile before moving on to the next, I don't know, 100 or 200 applications that they have to go through. And so, because we know that their attention and their time and their energy is so scarce and limited, we didn't make sure that we are doing all the heavy lifting for them. So, what does that mean? It means that we need to not only have the correct content and have it written in a certain way. That is easy for them to understand, but also lay it out or design it in a way that is very skimmable for them. I'm going to talk more about the design part of it in our next resource. So let's take a look here. Remember when I first talked about, I'll go back to this, the resume content? So the professional summary. Unfortunately, for this one pager, new graduate resume, they don't have that. It's not, there's no like hard and fast rules in writer resume. Anything goes. It's literally just a blank piece of paper and it's whatever you want to put on it. Of course, with that being said, there are some tried and true methods and things that you should be doing to get the most attention on your resume. So, this one does not have a professional summary. You don't need to have it, but I highly recommend it because that is a really good way for you to give a summary of who you are and what you're all about to the recruiter or the hiring manager without them having to read the thing and then piece it together themselves. Because again, they don't have the time or energy to do that. So you want to be walking them through the whole entire thing. Okay. So, two, let's go on to skills. Okay. Their skills is right here down at the bottom. I'm not sure why that's here. It seems like a pretty important section to be putting up at the top because, well, why would you make the recruiter read the whole entire resume only to find what skills you actually have at the very bottom, if they even make it to the bottom? So I would definitely put that back up at the top half of the page or the top of the fold. So now let's look at the content here. So they talk about languages, there's Java, Python, JavaScript, C++, okay? They talk about frameworks and libraries, Spring, Hibernate, Node.js, Express, okay, and some tools. Git, Linux, AWS, Jira, okay, sure, pretty basic stuff. Um, I would say to make it pop a little bit more, these subheadings, the languages, the frameworks, and the tools, perhaps either underline that or bold that or make it in a different color, conservative color. So that's like a gray, blue. Yeah, that's about it. um, Something like that to just make it pop a little bit more because right now it just seems like a lot of words, a lot of text. And, recruiters, they don't have the time and you want to make it easy for them. I would also tailor the languages, frameworks, and tools according to that particular job posting that I am applying for. So, for example, if that particular job posting does not mention anything remotely similar to, say, I don't know, Hibernate under these frameworks and libraries, I might take that off, you know? Sometimes less is more. So just keep that in mind. Food for thought. Okay, next section talked about education and certificates. Okay, where is that? Up here, the first section. So they don't have a certificate section because they probably just graduated. Okay, it says City, New Zealand, University of X. Here's the date. The end date is in quote because they haven't graduated yet. They're getting a BE in software engineering. I'm not sure what a BE means. Does that stand for bachelor? Anyways, in software engineering. And then GPA, okay, they're not on a 4.0 scale, but probably local New Zealanders would know that. Somebody from North America would not. So, a couple of things I would change here is if this person is looking to stay in the same city or in the same country as where they live and have gone to school, you don't need to put in the location. That is wasted real estate, right? And it is prime real estate, especially if you only have one page. So I'd get rid of that. Once you have graduated, you actually don't need to put in the date that you started, just the date or just the year, not even the date, just the year that you graduated from. It's nice to know that this person graduated with honors and what their GPA, CGPA is. two things: what to do now immediately and what to do in the future as they accumulate more work experience. So, right now, what they could do is actually flush it a little bit more. Were they in leadership positions for on campus clubs? Did they become a TA, teaching assistants? Did they, I don't know, were they a study abroad student? If they had any, if they made the dean's list, the honor roll, gotten certain scholarships, maybe it's a full ride 4-year scholarship, like those are kind of important to put into. Did they do some co-ops and internships and stuff like that? Like, fill it out a little bit more. This doesn't really tell me how you spent like the last 4 years going to school. It just tells me this is the degree that you studied and this is your GPA. So, paint that picture for me. Secondly, down the road, when this person has accumulated more work experience, they can start leaving things off. So it could probably be as short as this. We don't need to know the GPA. It's not that relevant, to be honest. I forgot to talk about one of the most important sections, which is your header. So let's look at that now. So first name, last name, I'm right in the center right now. And then below there is a website. That's cool. If you don't have that, most people don't. You could just leave that off. On the right hand side, we're looking at GitHub, first name, last name, and then LinkedIn, first name, last name. GitHub, I would say, is mostly for software developers. If you're in cyber, you probably don't need that. LinkedIn is a must. Everybody should have one. If you don't, you're really at a disadvantage. And then on the left hand side, we have the email address and phone number. The only thing I would say there is make sure your email address is professional. If you don't have one, you can create one just for the purpose of job searching. This way, it doesn't clutter your personal inbox, right? You can do a little bit of branding as well. So say first name, last name at gmail.com. And for your LinkedIn, did you know that you can also have a personalized URL? It's somewhere in your settings, definitely Google or ChatGPT the instructions on how to change that. But essentially, you can make it so that it is just your first name, last name without any gibberish afterwards. And it would just look a lot more clean and tightened up. And that's what we want. Couple of things not to put on is your full address. No one really needs to know. References available upon request is also not something you need to put in here because when you get to that stage, they will ask you for your references. Okay, next section is work experience. Great. So we're here under employment. So let's see, what does this person have? Software engineering tutor, University of X. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with that first line. The first bullet there, teaching students on software engineering practices and the fundamentals of Java and OO object orientation design. That is okay, but it's not great. Remember what Jeff Su was talking about in terms of quantifiable metrics. So this is the perfect time to put that in. So for example, teaching students. How many students? Software engineering practice and the fundamentals of Java and this design. Okay, so for example, what are some of these software engineering practices? What are the fundamentals of these designs? Like list out a couple things so that I know you know what you're talking about. This person can also include a little bit about the frequency of them teaching students and perhaps the impact of this person's teaching the students. Like what have they done afterwards? And let's see. Okay, so January 2019, and this was uploaded August 2019. It's been a good 8 months, that deserves more than one bullet point. Okay, let's go down to the next one. Software engineering intern. Okay, great. Sydney, Australia. Okay, cool. About 4 months. Okay, implemented priority action to allow rotation of sensitive database credentials during instance. Okay, again, quantifiable metrics or measurable metrics here. So, what are these priority actions? Rotation of sensitive database credentials. Okay, it sounds kind of vague. Like, can you talk to me in human terms of what that is? During incidents, how many incidents over a span of what's the time frame here, right? Okay, next bullet point. Created Kotlin microservice allowing eventually consistent information to be resynced in response to delays, reducing overall time to execute by 25% and eliminating frequent alerts and pages. Okay, Very good that they mentioned one of the, what did they say? Languages on here, Colton, and also for using a percentage, like some sort of a number, 25%, reducing overall time to execute by 24%. Okay, great. How do we make this better? It's a little bit wordy right now. I would definitely try to tighten this up. This would be a really good bullet to copy and paste into ChatGPT and ask it to tighten it up for you. And last time we talked about learning the basics of prompt engineering. So this would be a really good time to go back to that video by Jeff Su and watch that for more inspiration. So, um, another thing that jumps to mind is it says reducing overall time to execute by 25%. That is great. I would love just a little bit more detail. So, what was the time frame to execute before, and then what was it to execute after? Okay, so I think you get the gist of it. Let's move on to the next section. The next one is other. So that's a volunteer, projects, etc. And they do have projects down here. It feels longer than their employment section, but I think that's just because it has more bullet points. I would definitely recommend to combine a couple of these bullet points, see if it can be merged together to make it less choppy. Okay, so organ donation management system. Here is the link for it. Worked within a Scrum team to develop solutions to improve organ matching processes. Okay, great. How do we make this better? Okay, so which role was he playing in the Scrum team? How big was the team? Like, give me a number. And what were the solutions that you developed? And how did you improve this organ matching process? Is it by like the sheer count of matches? Is it by the speed of the matching? Again, give me more specifics and quantifiable metrics. I think I've given enough samples and you guys understand what needs to be done to beef up this resume even more. So let's move on to the next thing. While I was researching on Reddit, I came across this website that people kept quoting. So this gentleman here, Asa, he actually wrote an extensive article on how to write a infosec resume, which I think is the bomb. It's a couple years ago, but I think it's still relevant. So he has really good tips on how to format so that it's ATS friendly, what are the different sections in the resume. But instead of going through all that, because I know you can read that on your own, what I really want to use this article for is to talk about the design of the resume. So let's get to it. I'm not going to use this one. This I think is so interesting. Can I? So what's really interesting here is that somebody put a heat map on this resume. What it does is actually it tracks where the mouse goes when it lands on this document. And so you can kind of see a little F shape with all the different colors. So red means hot. A lot of people's mouse went over that. And then it goes orange, yellow, green, and then blue. And dark blue is like, I think not as much. But anywho, just focus on the red. Red, orange, yellow. That's what you need to look at. So you can see there's kind of like two horizontal lines, one at the very top and one in the middle. This is kind of like an F shape. As you can see, there's not a lot of people reading on the right? Which is why all the titles and stuff like that should probably be on the left. So let's take a look. Okay, so what do we see here? I see that certain things are bolded. So the name of the school, the degree that he got. I also see in that first bullet point, the numbers are the one that's getting clicked on. So he had a perfect score on his GRE and he graduated with distinction, top 10% of class. Do you see the difference? Distinction, and then also in quotes, explains how you get that distinction and it has a number in it, and therefore people's eyes are being drawn there. Independent studies, not so much there, which makes sense because it just seems like a big blocks of text, which is what we don't want. And then the next one down is the University of Illinois, and that gets the clicks or the eyeballs because it's the biggest font in that subsection. And then next it goes down to, again, GPA 3.68 out of 4, and then Dean's List, and it explains what Dean's List is top 15%. Okay, the next one down is Deloitte Consulting LLP. Let's just see. Oh, I see. So he's only worked at one place, but since 2008 all the way till 2013. So that's like what, 5 years, and he has gotten promoted twice. So that's why Deloitte, being the title that is the biggest and in all caps and bold, it gets the eyeballs. And then that first bullet point, the 20% or 2 MN, I'm not sure what that means. Million? And then as you can see there in the second bullet point, 40%, 70 business units and 500 employees, it's getting those eyeballs. It's getting those clicks. And then the rest of it is pretty much just people are skimming. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Yeah, it's pretty long, but it's so much value that it's good. Let's look at design. Where are your eyes going? Mine are going to all of the bolded titles and subtitles on the left-hand side of the page. I'm also looking at the bullets as well, and I don't know if you can tell because it's kind of tiny, but these bullets are actually a different color. They're blue. My eyes are not going to the right-hand side where all the dates. I'm not looking at that. Um, there also seems to be a little bit too much bolding, so my eyes are just kind of darting to different things. I like the fact that there are these horizontal lines across the whole entire page for each section. I think that does make it a bit more visually easy to understand which section is which. But overall, it's quite busy. I would take out high school under education. You probably don't need that, especially since you have some key projects already and, you know, there's like a master degree or something like that. You definitely don't need high school. The languages, I would not remove it, but I would add that to the career profile. And just removing those two things, this person would have so much more room to play with in terms of just like spacing and creating more white space so that the recruiter who's really busy skimming like 200,000 resumes spend a little bit more time deciphering what's happening here. So, for example, under key project experience, under each, I think I would call them subtitles, the 2020 dissertation project. And then on the second page at the top, it says 2020 Security of Emerging Connected Systems Project. And then the 2021 project. That's not enough spacing in between each one. And that's why it looks so busy. So removing high school, removing languages, and even the personal development, I wonder if that is worth putting in there. It does seem like it is relevant to cyber, so maybe it's a good idea to leave it. Not sure. Yeah, definitely just a bit more white space, bit more spacing, and even just looking at the first page at the top, the header, there's some white space in there. You can probably push things up a little bit more as well. So that's my 2 cents for this one. Let's look at this other one. Okay, this one. Where do your eyeballs fall? I actually do feel like this one has better spacing than the first one, but it's still a bit too busy. For example, the core competencies, that seems like a lot. Maybe just have 4 bullets per row, sorry, per column instead. And make sure, of course, you're just putting things in there that is relevant. Again, there's that word again, to the job posting that you're applying for. Okay, so they have summary, core competencies, education, experience, and then they have a section that's relevant coursework and projects. I may not have that in there. There's like 5 different things. And then they have awards and honors. If they're a new graduate, sure, keep that in there. But unless the award is relevant to the job, I would just take that out. And the relevant coursework, again, maybe pick 3 at the most, not all 5. This could be a master resume, and then you can, sub things in however you wish for that particular job posting. And then this way, there's more white space, there's more spacing in between the lines, and then you could probably increase the font size by 1, make it more readable, right? That is the name of the game. Definitely make it easy for them to do their job. let's move on to the next one. Last one here. From a design point of view, it actually looks really neat. I like that. However, the first thing I notice is it's 2 columns, and that is bad for putting your resume into the ATS, the applicant tracking system, because I've heard this time and time again, it doesn't parse well if you have more than 1 column. So what an ATS does is once you upload your resume, it's just pulling content. It's pulling all the text out of your resume. It's not keeping the format of your resume, and then it's plugging it into however the system wants to receive that data. So you don't really have control over how your resume is like cut and paste into the system, or if they show you the result of how it parsed, you might then have to manually go in there and cut and paste things to make sure that everything is how you want it to be. So I would just recommend saving yourself the headache and making sure that all your resume, your cover letter, any kind of CVs and stuff like that are just 1 column only. With that said, this does look very clean. Okay, so now remember, the resume is a marketing document. It is your first impression, and in cybersecurity, competition is fierce. So a strong resume gets you the interview, and a strong interview gets you the final offer. So, in my own journey, what I've noticed is I've been tweaking my resume pretty much every 2 to 3 applications. I've been just looking at it with fresh eyes and making sure and just trying things out, maybe tweaking the formatting, using different phrases, different words, and putting in new things that I've done. So, for example, starting this YouTube channel, that's in my resume. A training that I did for applied AI in cybersecurity, that's now on my resume. Do you see what I mean? I'm always trying to improve this marketing document because you never know how your best one yet will land you that interview that can land you that job. So a few takeaways from this video would be make sure that your resume tells a really clear story of why you'd be a great fit for the role and the company. And every section should add value, not just take up space. Remember, this is a marketing document, not just a list of your previous job experiences. So, looking back at my own journey, I would say that the mistake I made was I overcomplicated my resume. I was trying to fit in too much and it became really busy. As time went on and the more refinements and the more tweaks that I've done to my resume, it became a lot more clear, more impactful, and more relevant. And I think that is the name of the game here. It needs to be relevant to that job so that you'll be invited to a interview. And just a note on those quantifiable metrics. I know that you can't measure every single thing, but try to at least show the impact of your words. Another thing that I did was I asked my friends and some people that I trusted in the industry to look at my resume and give me some feedback. And what I learned from that was if they're not a hiring manager within cybersecurity or a recruiter, their opinion is a best guess. Because how would they know? The conclusion of me doing that was essentially getting a different opinion on my resume every single time I gave it to somebody. It just confused me more. So in the end, I just realized that I needed to trust my gut and go with it. I understand that not everybody has a eye for design or have been a hiring manager, but that's what worked for me. And if you don't have those things, well, that's why I created these videos because I wanted to share some resources with you so that it can help you. As always, stay curious and see you in the next video where we'll be talking all about the different types of interviews and how to prep for them.